Hello again, good morning, and welcome back. This is session two. Basically, we're going to run three 30-minute breakout sessions across three parallel streams. Now you can move between those streams if you want. You can attend three options live. The remaining breakouts will be available on demand post-event. So if you don't manage to hit both the ones that you want, it's like buses. You know, the ones you really want to see always come along at the same time. They're all good, it has to be said. This first chunk, the alternative sessions running now in the other two streams are Breakout B, Operational Integrity, Safeguarding Your OT Systems with Cyber AI, and that's run by Johnny Burgoyne from Darktrace. Breakout C, Change in Philosophy, Moving from a Project Structure to an Operations Structure, with Akil Ajazi from OpenText. But here, this is Breakout A, this is Alex Robertson, Digital Deployment Lead for Petrofac, talking about a roadmap to an analytics program that actually delivers. So, Alex, over to you.
Okay, thanks ever so much. And yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks to Digit. So, as Mark gave a very brief overview there, so I'm going to be discussing today around primarily around digital dashboards and why organizations have them as a key milestone, a yardstick in their overall program, and why it's important. And it's one of these things that it starts to bring your whole digital program to life. You know, the dashboards are all about reporting and analytics and giving you lots of colors and interesting things to look at to start measuring how well you're doing in terms of your digital strategy. And it's not something you do at the start, and it's not something you do at the end. It's something in the middle, and as a result, it becomes a really useful yardstick in understanding where you are. But the problem with it, as more and more of us are deploying this technology, Power BI, Tableau, and others, is that the value that we think, or we promised ourselves, we thought we were going to get, isn't actually happening. People aren't using it as much. People aren't seeing the value from it. And so I'm hoping to help articulate why that might be the case and give you some guidance as to what needs to be done. And you know, and as the dashboards don't work, or as disappointment starts to set in, then everyone starts, the big bosses start saying, well, why don't you use machine learning? Why don't you use AI? That's what these tools are for. And it sounds really simple, but it's not. And what I want to do is I want to explain to you how, well, one roadmap in terms of getting to the point in which it's a really viable suite of tools that really starts to drive that margin to your bottom line, gives you better predictability into what you're actually trying to achieve, and really helps you think about what it is you're doing and actually think about things slightly differently, because what we did last year isn't the same as what we're going to be doing next year in terms of how we use this technology to help us. And that's the important part. So here, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you an idea as to some things about what goes wrong in the dashboarding environment, and then the sort of things you need to do to actually turn it to life down the road. So in terms of what I do for Petrofac, I've got a pretty broad remit, but the long and the short of it is that my remit is to look forward 5-10 years time and see how globally we as not just Petrofac, but just as a general delivery organization, need to deliver our big capital projects and our operational support contracts. So a lot of the topics that I'm going to be speaking to you about today or the frame of reference is going to be around how we deliver big programs, how we predictably deliver projects, how we predictably perform better. And that's not with the tangible, you know, widget in, widget out type approach, but it's also about people as well. So how can we get people to perform better, safer? And looking 10 years in advance, trying to pick out what technology and what the world and landscape of technology is going to look like, and then applying it to today and building a path to delivering something for the future that's hopefully a lot better than it is today. So right down at the fundamentals, and you'll be pleased I'm not going to dwell on this, but I've got a 5-stage roadmap that I want to discuss with you. And the first 2 stages I'm not really going to mention, other than everyone dealing with big projects and big companies have a core system, and everyone is proud when they manage to integrate all those systems together. And the proof of the pudding is that actually then you can start running some pretty clever reports. My expectation is everyone knows what these things are to their individual organizations or personal level interactions. But what we quickly get to is the world that you need those 2 things to happen before you start to use the fancy dashboards of Power BI and Tableau and the likes. And fundamentally, what you start to see is a whole bunch of stuff. It really excites people. It gives people some visuals that they can go away and think, great, we've cracked this, we've nailed this. And typically what we end up seeing is that is the aspirations of many organizations. Let's get dashboards in place. Let's have this massive drive to put all our reports into a dashboarding environment. And that's important. It's a step to success. But actually, if we think about it, what we need to do, what I advise that people do, is that any report, any finding, anything at any level for any person needs to be accessible within 3 clicks. And if that structure in your dashboarding environment doesn't lend itself to allow that, then have a look at yourself. But that 3 clicks rule is really important. So if I'm a material storeman sitting out in the warehouse, can I get access to my information on my project within 3 clicks? If I'm a project manager, same rules apply. And if I'm the managing director of a service line, same rules apply. I want to know the information important to me within 3 clicks of a mouse. And it's a ubiquitous thing. Everyone should be able to do that. And that isn't what most organizations are currently doing, that ease of access to information. And I would advocate that that is applied. But that model about creating a dashboard, that looks like success to many organizations. So what my topic of conversation is really about from now, that's kind of the background. So what tends to happen is that in the dash for dashboards, we suddenly see thousands of them. We see, in my service department, we've got hundreds. And, that's great. That means we've done a whole bunch of work in the background and we've got access to more better information than we've ever had before. But actually people stop using it because there's just too much stuff, and where do they go and look for it? Which ones should they use? Which ones should they go and look for? And actually, they don't, a lot of them don't bother. And what I'd like you to think about is just very quickly is once you make these dashboards live, what percentage of the people that you thought would be using them is actually using them in 3 months' time? So what percentage uses them after 3 months of deployment? And the answer, for many people that I've spoken to, and anecdotally, it's only about 15%. And that's a fraction of who you'd want it to be used by. So it'd be interesting to see maybe in the Q&A afterwards if that resonates with people, and if you've got an ability to put something in the chat box, but just be really interested to see what people think about that. But the thing with the 15% is the 15% of people that are actually using it are your A team. And most organizations have the best, and there's some really good people and there's not so good people, and there's some people they think, it's the A team that use it. And they're the ones that you don't necessarily think should be using it. So how do you get the vast majority of the organization to really use it and drive the value? Because without using this sort of stuff, you're not getting the margins you predicted. You're not getting the predictability you predicted. People start to get frustrated. So we need to answer the so what, right? And the so what is, how can I get access to the information that I want really, really quickly? And as a head of a project or a head of a function or a manager, I want to know what's important. I want to know it quickly. And I want the dashboard to set the expectation of what's important and answer the question, so what? So if I'm a user that going into that dashboard, what is it that I need to do? And this is one of the key failings, is that we trust our guys, and rightly so, to deliver and to do the right things at the right time. But what happens if they miss something? What happens if they can't be bothered to do something? How do we use this technology to hold people to account to do what they should be doing? And if they're not aware of it, actually, just at the fundamental level, the dashboard should be advising them and nudging them along the path to what is an acceptable standard of performance. And that is across any type of metric that you're looking to see: HSE, quality, materials management, absence rates, whatever it happens to be. It's true for all of them. So if you're starting at the bottom end of an organization, you're a young graduate or an apprentice or what have you, you've got access to information, you've got access to systems, and your network of knowledge and understanding and people is quite small. Yeah, but as you go up one level of the organization, maybe at a manager's level, then that explodes pretty quickly in terms of the things that you're meant to know and have a good handle on. And the issue with dashboards is that it's all treated the same. You know, every issue is equally weighted to another issue unless you cleverly designed your dashboards. But the principle is that you've got to go looking for your dashboards. You've got to go looking into them. And then how do you find those top 3 things that are the most important? How do you do that if you've got 100 dashboards to look through? It's really time consuming. And that's why people start to get fatigued for it, because what you want to know is what should I be doing with this information, and how bad is it? How bad is the exception that's triggering something? And this is the key part. And the higher up the organization you go, the more difficult it is to find the 3 most important things that you as an individual should be doing. Now, it's great. It's like the dashboards are like a safety blanket, a comfort blanket. You know, great to have, but there is no way on earth that we're going to have management, director level people looking through dashboards and trying to find the 3 things that they need to get after. We need to make their lives easier. So a few things. Our dashboards, they must tell us what we need to do, and that's at all levels in the company, at all levels in the hierarchy. And if they're just a pretty picture, a visualization of general performance, that's fine. But actually, fundamentally, what do we need to do to improve the performance? How does contract A look like when compared to contract B? What are they doing slightly differently? What do we need to do to improve? What is the expectations of the minimum standard that is acceptable to us? We need to address these in our dashboards. We need to think about those expectation setting ability within a dashboard. And then the other aspect is, you know, when we get into our car in the morning, when we used to do that, at least, we don't expect to go through the dashboard in the car and tell us, right, what's my fuel gauge level like? What error messages are pinging up on the dashboard? We don't expect to drill through the dashboard to find that in the car. But we do expect to do that through the use of some of this technology, right? That's wrong. What we need to get to is the place where those 3 things, that big one flashing light that you've got no fuel, that needs to get thrown in your face. You shouldn't go to the dashboard to find it. The dashboard should fling it at you. Again, that's not what's happening at the moment. So I talked earlier on about 3 clicks to access any information. And that's a really important fundamental part. But the most important thing, if you can take anything away from this today, is that how do you get every person at every level the 3 most important actions they need to do automatically? And that's quite tricky. But and then how do you set that rule set? What rule set does that look like? And then how bad does it have to be to jump from the storeman up to the supply chain manager, up to the head of function, up to your MD? And, you know, there are time-bound issues around there. There's scale and value issues around there. But all of these things make sure that the right action goes to the right person at the right time. And that's the most important thing. Turn the dashboards into meaningful actions. So it's what I call automated performance. So what we're doing is we're setting expectations into a series of triggers that are either time-bound, value-bound, or a combination of both. And those triggers trigger an issue, and they get emailed to the right person at the right time, the right place. So that's a really important piece. But those triggers are only as good as our experience as individuals and as a group of people. So how do we improve those? And that's where AI and machine learning really comes in. So every one of the dashboards you have, if you're thinking about how am I going to turn on machine learning, well, my bosses keep asking me, what are you going to do in machine learning? Every single dashboard that you have has the ability to do a bit of machine learning. And the most simple way of doing things is helping it predict what you thought your expectations were. So if you thought that bad was a delay of 3 months, well, actually, if every single one of your contracts only delayed 2.5 months, if that was the worst case scenario, your trigger isn't 3 months, it's 2.5 months. And for you to do that as an individual level is almost impossible. But that's when you can start to apply some new technology to really start driving improvements in standards and benchmarks automatically. The trick here is choosing the technology set, which I'm not going to explain how to do, but what I want to do is tell you the sort of principles of why the dashboards is only in the middle. It's a middle stage. If you've got the dashboards, it allows you to automate things. Once you've automated things based on a rule set, then you can apply some more intelligence, and you can really have a program that takes your AI machine learning right across your delivery organization. Just giving a tangible example on safety. So we're all presumably familiar with the Swiss cheese model of safety. If you line all the holes up in a bunch of Swiss cheeses and an incident comes and it manages to weave its way through all those holes, you're going to hurt someone. And there's been a lot of work done over the years about procedural safety and other things that effectively tries to put barriers in the way, so offset those holes. And the improvement in terms of the accidents over time has reduced dramatically, but it's flatlined. And one of the things there is a large community of people doing just now is taking that concept of all those Swiss cheese models, using that, and then thinking, well, actually, all that stuff is in the past. It's stuff that we've done already. Yeah, we've done as much as we can, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff about predicting safety events happening. And this is a really good example of where we can start to apply machine learning and start to use the systems and dashboards and what have you to pull all this together. But wouldn't it be good for every project or every asset or every building, whatever it is that you work with? Wouldn't it be great to know that today is a high risk day? There is a greater likelihood of an incident happening today than there is normal. And there are a whole bunch of soft factors that we don't measure, such as when was the last time the guy had some training? When was the last time there was some competency assessed? And all of these little soft factors all suggest a greater likelihood of an incident in a certain place. But actually, these are all the internal things we have today. All those green arrows that I show you there, all internal things that you all have today. You've got the building blocks. But then having a bit of fun with this, there's a whole bunch of third-party information that you also have access to through the web. And interestingly enough, there's been a fairly good study done recently on a real project where they suggested that it was the Champions League match that was the day after the Champions League match was the biggest indicator of an accident happening at site. It wasn't overtime. It wasn't how many hours the guys had worked the day before. It wasn't how many activities were happening at site. It was because they were all in the pub having a bevy. And just knowing that fact, right, you can take that to your site manager and say, right, you guys, there's a Champions League session on tomorrow, chill it out a bit, be a bit sensible about it. And, and absence rates drop. We typically would never correlate champions league game to safety performance. But that's the sort of thing that we can do now with this technology if you think about using your information in a slightly different context. And you will do once you go through that 4 or 5 step building process that I talked about. It encourages and enables these sorts of conversations. Final slide before Q&A. There is a group of people, if you're looking for inspiration as to how all this comes together, right? This is a ubiquitous problem. We're all facing the same sort of thing. This is all new to all of us. But there is a group of people in academia, in government, and across UK industry, from defence through to the built environment, to the energy sector, all trying to come up with the same problems for projects. And the idea behind this is quite simple. It's a collaborative affair. There is, if you spend a little bit of time putting your ideas forward, there are going to be free tools available for you and free proof of concepts freely available for you to use. So it's an inspirational piece, free to all. I'd encourage you, there's a little website there, PDA Task Force. If you're looking for inspiration, log on to that. Have a look at one of the logos at the bottom is a company called Projecting Success. Have a look at their website, and in particular their YouTube site. Thousands of fantastic ideas about how to use analytics, how to use AI, machine learning to really drive improvements in your organization. And that closes my session. So Mark, back over to yourself, please.
Okay. Alex, thank you very much for that. A question's come in here from Aurelia Dine, and just to reiterate, if you've got any question that you'd like to put to Alex, you can stick it down at the bottom of the screen at any time and I'll pass it on. This is quite an interesting one. It says, to make the type of prediction you were talking about, the sort of Champion Leagues match prediction, you need multiple incidents to program this type of analysis. Very often they don't have that repetition of incidents in order to do that. And the only other way of doing it is by pulling resources across various companies. And traditionally, energy companies are terrible at pooling resources. How do you get around that?
So this is brilliant. Yeah, this is exactly the point. So you need to be able to do it yourself before you can take information from others in. There is now a number of organizations, and the OGA, for those of you who know the OGA, the Oil and Gas Association, is looking at data trusts. The HSE executive, they are looking at, they've got a program called, it's slipping my mind now, predictable delivery or something along those lines. But in essence, these data trusts are a safe way to pass information that is non-commercially sensitive, that's in an environment that gets run by a not-for-profit organization, but it's a legal entity in its own right. And what they do is they anonymize everything. They guarantee anonymity. And what we're looking for as part of the PDA task force that I mentioned is what we're trying to do is encourage organizations to get behind the concept of these data trusts and share information. And part of what we do in the task force is to encourage that and facilitate a program that will eventually lead to that type of environment. It's happening in the construction sector. It's live. The construction sector is actively doing this. They are sharing commercially non-sensitive information, but things like safety that just people want to make a difference with. You need to do it internally first, but moves are afoot to encourage others to collaborate with data.
I saw a card the other day which said, you are my best friend, I am your best friend. Let us share our deepest secrets. You go first.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a problem, isn't it?
That's the issue. But that's, things like safety. I think once you get somewhere up the organization, if you agree in the principle of it, and that what is wrong with sharing your safety stats? Now, you might choose to take asset out if you're looking at a particular platform in the North Sea or a particular project. You can choose to remove that information, but fundamentally there are some stuff that let's take it slightly differently. if I'm estimating a job, great big job, but I'm going to be installing 10,000 meters of pipework, I should know today what is the chance of me hurting someone based on that estimate number of the estimate of what I'm installing. And if we can encourage others to share that information, suddenly at the very point at which we've got an estimate together, we know the type of incident we're likely to occur. It's not going to happen, but it's more likely than, it's likely to. We can sort of predict the event of it happening. We can do something better about it because we know about it right at the start. And that, every single one of the dashboards that we have, we need to focus it on the idea is what is the earliest possible time that I can predict something with this information? And that's the change with the analytics piece. It's about helping you predict future success.
The changes that you've been making within your company, if you're talking about positive business outcomes, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about financial, or are we talking about in terms of safety, fewer accidents? How do you measure it?
Yeah, all of those things, but fundamentally, as a service company, if I can give my customers more predictable certainty. Now let's remove the word reducing cost, because that's where we tend to get to. But if I give an organization, a company, a cost and a schedule, can I predict it? Can I predict those outcomes more accurately in real time than ever before, and then get insights as to where those risks may be coming or those issues may be coming? That really makes a difference. It's being able to forecast with a slightly different way of looking at things where things might go wrong, and it's a probabilities game. It's not magic. It's all about managing the probability of things happening. But that insight provides a different way of looking at things.
Which brings us back again to both transparency and the accuracy of the information. I mean, it's the old software, crap in, crap out.
Yeah.
You need to have accurate information going in order to make predictions with any degree of accuracy.
Yeah, which comes back to your core systems, and many organizations have a hodgepodge of core systems that they don't really speak to one another. So that level 1 and level 2 of my roadmap, if your core systems are an Excel spreadsheet, you're going to struggle. You're really going to struggle. So it's all about a building block, but the roadmap doesn't. If you can have 1 or 2 systems in place and get to level 5, you can do some AI, machine learning stuff really quite quickly, but on a very, very narrow set or use case. But the more of these things you tie together in a sort of a cloud-based environment, and they truly are information passing to one another, you really start to see at scale areas that you never thought that you would see before. And going back to the Champions League game, until someone pointed that out to me, it's so obvious. But we don't measure these things, and you have these insights from every dashboard that you go through. You suddenly realize, wow, if we just join that little bit of information with that information, this is what it's telling us. And it's these little nuggets when you go through the process that really helps organizations start thinking more innovatively than they have done in the past.
One last point. I mean, crystal ball time. Across your working career, you will have seen huge changes. Say in another, on a good day, I would imagine, what you really want is, when you say to somebody within your organization, how did you find the system, for them to say, the absolute ideal would be for them to say, what system? Yeah. It was so instinctive, it was so natural that they didn't even notice they were doing something. How far could we chase that down the line?
So that's a great question, and I'm going to make it a little bit simpler. I don't think, the culture in most organizations is this proliferation of dashboards, right? A dashboard that I talked about it being a safety blanket, it's there, but you don't need to go for it unless you really have to, unless something's really gone wrong. It's more reporting, more work. Don't go to it. Rely on the automation, the predictions coming to you. And if we get that bit right at scale, or the right person doing the right thing at the right time, then, as you say, you don't realize it's there. It's in the background. It's just happening around you. And that's part of the AI ML thing. That's the route to success. when we start getting some of this technology in place, it will just happen, and you'll just get the right prompt at the right time without you knowing about it. And just like what your car does today.
Yeah. Alex, thank you very much. That was excellent. Alex Robertson there from Petrofac. Now, we're moving into the second chunk of sessions, if that makes sense. Breakout E is adapting the security function to the new normal with Mark McRitchie, IT and Security Architect for KCA Deutag. Breakout F is Be More Effective Online with Bob Keeler and Derek Thompson. This, however, is Breakout D, and it's Mike Gill, IT Project Manager for Weave Centrics. Why change management can derail your digital transformation and what you can try and do to keep it on track. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. The folks at McKinsey Research tell us that digital transformations have a failure rate of 84%. That's a staggeringly bad odds. If you can improve those odds, then you're going to be very popular in your company. I'm going to tell you how you can do that using change management in your digital transformation to keep it on track. My name's Mike Gill. I've been a transformation manager in a billion-dollar transformation, as well as a program manager in several large-scale digital initiatives. I'm going to share some of my insights I've gained from my time working on these transformations. I'll split this presentation into two parts. The first three sections explain some of the reasons why there are so many failures of digital transformations. That's the bad news bit. The second part looks at how we can use change management to improve the odds. That's the good news bit. So what is a digital transformation and why do we care? Well, let's start by addressing the number one killer of digital transformations. Digital transformation is not about technology. That's a bit controversial, isn't it? Companies focus on specific technologies, data analytics, anyone, rather than aligning their digital transformation along business goals, working towards the company strategy. Technology does have a place in digital transformations, of course, but it is an enabler for change within your business. There are three types of digital and digital transformation, and I'm not just being pedantic here. Each of the digitals means something different, and the approach to change differs greatly, but they are complementary, however. The first of our digitals is digitization, and is the often overlooked child as it normally sits within the business, hidden in the wastelands of shadow IT. The reality is it's the simple stuff that is often the trigger for innovation within a company. A spreadsheet model for costing, taking pictures for a report, a web form for standardizing a request. There are no prizes for digitization, but it forms a foundation for what follows. Our second digitalization is not about building stuff with it's more about building stuff with our digital blocks. Perhaps that's oversimplifying it. Digitalization is about using technology to make our business processes better. Better can mean faster, it can mean cheaper, or more attractive to customers. It will often use the power of digital to collect process information and help you create insights. Examples are automating AP invoice handling, online customer booking systems for a hotel, employee recruitment and onboarding. Digitalization is typically a joined-up initiative between the business and IT. Since there are changes in the business process, the initiatives will need varying degrees of change management to ease in the transition. This isn't just dealing with the people or training them, but it's managing the successful transition from one process state to the newly digitized process state. The key to this one, digital transformation, is the word transformation. The dictionary definition of this is a marked change in the form, nature, or appearance. Within a business context, this means a radical change in the way a company delivers value to its customers. It involves rethinking how your company can recombine people, processes, and technology to deliver new products and services to your customers. This radical change is strategy-led, not technology, see number one, and is built up of different initiatives, some of which will involve digitalization and digitization. So this one is at the pointy end of change management. It will come as no surprise then that number 2 in our failure parade is strategy, specifically not having an integrated strategy with clear transformation goals. And at number 3 in our hit parade is change management, but more on that later. If you're working on a digital transformation, the key components I'm going to show you here are not going to be news to you. However, I do want to show you the differences between a digital transformation for a customer-focused industry, say a mobile phone operator, and for an upstream oil and gas operator. Because there's a surprise clause coming, and it's not a nice surprise. So, a digital transformation, do I hit that properly there? A digital transformation is usually triggered by a change in business environmental conditions. These are things like macroeconomic variables, economic growth, inflation, unemployment, social changes, demographics, attitudes to climate change, political attitudes, technological advances, and market growth cycles. Your leadership will then start your digital transformation on the back of these triggers with a strategy, hopefully, and then tie in these other elements to come up with a set of transformation initiatives in a transformation roadmap. If you're an upstream oil and gas operator, there are a couple of flies in your ointment here. It's a bit more bad news for you. The first one is kind of obvious. We don't have customers in the same way as a mobile phone operator does. We sell crude oil, natural gas, and a bit of condensate on the side to traders as raw materials for a manufacturing process. We sell a commodity. We do not add value to a product for customers. Hence, there's virtually no value differentiation between operators. The second is less obvious, but drives the oil and gas industry behaviour massively. The industry is largely sheltered from macroeconomic factors. For example, the industry weathered the 2008 financial crisis reasonably well. However, commodity price fluctuations can be devastating, as 2014 saw with the collapse of the oil price. So what does this all mean for a digital transformation as an upstream oil and gas operator? Let's go back and look at the digital transformation failure rates again. McKinsey, as I said, have reported that 84% of digital transformations fail. That's only a 16% rate. It's very poor odds. And then we come to the surprise that I talked about earlier, the one that I said wasn't going to be a nice one. Traditional industries, such as oil and gas, have a digital success rates of between 4 and 11%. That's definitely not good news. So why are oil and gas so poor at digital transformations? If we look at general digital transformations, it helps to understand the issues and why it is compounded in the oil and gas industry. When your leadership developed their strategy for your digital transformation, it will have been the trigger factors that gave them the impetus to kick the whole thing off. Hence, the relative influence of these triggers will set the tone for the roadmap they take. There is a tendency, especially in the face of external pressures, for organisations to look inwards when making changes. Hence, around 70% of digital transformations have digitising their internal operating model as their transformation objective. Oil and gas, with the boom and bust cycle, is particularly prone to focusing on inward-looking efficiency gains. 2015 was a fairly savage year for that. Also, less than half of all digital transformations interact outside their organisation. In the oil and gas industry, the lack of a consumer-based product where you can add value through a transformation reinforces this behaviour. Hence, the typical strategy for an oil and gas operator's digital transformation is inward-focused on internal efficiencies and doesn't interact with the company's ecosystem, the supply chain and partners. Finally, the strategies are often focused on a particular technology. For example, we need to do something with digital twins. Let's have a digital twin strategy. No, you don't. Technology is there to enable potential futures. What you need to do is figure out what you want to change and who you're going to do that with first. And that takes us right back to change, to the change word, number 3 in our hit parade. Organisations that embed change management within their digital transformations are more than 3 times more likely to succeed than others. So that's our 3 digital transformation failure areas. strategy, focus on technology, and change management. Now, I'll leave you to speak to your leadership team about the first two, but we can have a chat about change management now. The reality is that your business change is embedded in the DNA of your digital transformation. You can't separate it because business change is integral to transformations. The elements you see in front of you are the ones you saw earlier when I was talking about the key components of digital transformation. Unsurprisingly, they're key to change management as well. By this stage in your digital transformation, your leadership will have defined a strategy, hopefully, that's our digital drivers, digital visions here, started to set up a transformation organization and begun their messaging across your ecosystem. I'm going to concentrate on two of these, of the designing your business change elements, as we don't have a lot of time to do. Your strategy will identify the set of business goals. These goals then become your targets for your transformation initiatives. Remember that some of these transformation initiatives may be digital building blocks, and that's okay. Your roadmap is not going to be set in stone, however. It will change as your trigger factors change. It will have been built against a particular risk attitude, and so the success of transformation initiatives is not assured, but that's okay. Your transformation initiatives later in your digital transformation will be a bit vague, as that is an uncertain future. You'll be sketching out transformation initiatives without knowing how you're going to actually achieve it. All of that is okay. A key point in digital transformations is that you're going somewhere new. Your digital vision signposts this to your ecosystem. There are innovation techniques that you can use that basically say, assume there is technology behind you to achieve your business goal. Worry about the technology later. That is disruptive thinking. Some of these transformation initiatives aren't going to work out, and some are going to give you spectacular results. That's all okay. Part of a digital transformation is fostering a culture where risk-taking is seen as learning rather than failure. After sketching out your digital transformation initiatives, you look at what you need to deliver them: the people, process, and technology. These are our digital drivers. What business process do you need to deliver the goal? What technology do you need to enable these processes? What skills and resources does your ecosystem need for your new processes? That is the hard bit. At IBM, I worked as a transformation manager on one of their major transformations. Some of the transformation initiatives I delivered were surprisingly easy, delivering benefits in the $100 million range in months. Some needed multiple technologies, took years, and were really hard work. Some got killed off because the cost of the business change outweighed the benefits. Working out these digital drivers means trade-offs. By that, I mean you have to balance the potential benefits against the costs on people, processes, and technologies, as well as the impact on the business. So that is what change management design is all about. So how do we deliver the change? You all know that change within a business context is difficult. People don't behave in the way we expect them to. I'm going to focus on why this happens and give you some tools for helping deliver the change actually on the ground. This picture demonstrates the uncertainty behind the behaviours of people. The council behind this change wanted to slow cyclists down before they approached a busy road. Perfectly sensible and logical. The cyclists, however, have other ideas and ignored the change even when it clearly isn't safe. Why is that? What makes people act like that? Psychological research tells us that people can hold two sets of conflicting behaviours at the same time in their head. A cyclist will agree that it is a sensible, logical thing for their safety. However, their emotional side doesn't want to slow down and ignores the logical side. This duality of behaviour is known as cognitive dissonance and is a fundamental consideration when implementing a business change. That's because this cognitive dissonance causes stress or mental fatigue. When you ask someone to do something different from their current behaviour, it manifests as mental stress. When they do their original behaviour, the routine, that stress goes away. Hence, the brain tends to follow the path of least mental stress even when it doesn't make sense. cognitive dissonance is the cause of much of the so-called passive resistance in our change initiatives. Luckily for us, there are some techniques that we can use to reduce the impact. When you have a transformation initiative to deliver, your biggest uncertainty will be the behaviour of the people who are going to be doing your change processes. There are three levers you can push to make your change go in the correct direction: the logical side, the emotional side, and adjusting the pathway. On the logical side, we can get our management to signpost a change to the transformation initiative users. This is our transformation initiative goal and eliminates ambiguity as to what people should be doing. In one example, this was about reduce the amount of people we put offshore, a very clear direction to them. Also, a good tip which worked for us is to speak to other organisations, both in oil and gas and other industries, find out what works for them, and then ruthlessly copy it into your own organisation. We found that you need to give people a set of behaviours to do that will work towards your signposted purpose. To explain this, that transformation initiative I spoke about had a goal of reduce the number of people we put offshore. A key behaviour for that was to use a digital twin as a source for survey measurements for fabrication, eliminating the need to send survey crews offshore. A simple behaviour that was a small, achievable step. The emotional side is much more tricky. People struggle to explain their emotional behaviours to you as they are intuitive and not analytical. So you have to look at things that make people think of your change in a positive light. These positive emotional triggers are very hard to spot, but experience helps to identify them. The key point is to find out what works for them and work with that. You can also directly address the tension of cognitive dissonance, this duality thing, by breaking down your change into simple steps. If you present people with a small change, it creates less mental stress, so it is easier to follow the change. This last one, the growth mindset, is another difficult concept. It comes from research on the ways we learn and the remapping of neural pathways from that. At its essence, a person with a growth mindset tends to approach difficulty as a challenge, and are more likely to persevere when facing setbacks. This ties back into the cognitive dissonance tension. You and your willing management need to encourage people to try within a risk-free environment and show mistakes as learning rather than failure. Our final group looks at adjusting the pathway to sidestep the problems. You need to be able to recognise when a step in your change will cause that bite gate moment, where cognitive dissonance will cause passive resistance. You need to recognise that point and then change the path to reduce the mental stress the change causes the people who are working on it. You can reduce the mental stress by making things routine. People who use your change processes for structured tasks on a daily basis will quickly lose their cognitive stress. You sometimes have to use a mandate to make that happen, however. Interestingly, another source of cognitive stress is caused when we differ from our peers. Think how awkward it is when you walk into a party and you're dressed differently from everyone else. You want to be the same as them. This social behaviour, trying to fit in, can be exploited when during your change initiative to round up the change laggards. There's a final bit of challenging news for you. Only about 22% of organisations are successful in scaling up digital innovation projects. Luckily for us, there are some simple steps that you can use to improve your odds. Governance on a digital transformation has to have leadership with enough clout to make things happen. Typically, this means a C-level, which is usually a double-edged sword. Without that management encouragement, you will face passive resistance from business unit managers who are too busy. You can reduce the organisational change burden by using a minimum value product. This gets everyone moving in the right direction, reducing corporate inertia. Think of it as a small step for a big corporation. I haven't talked about impacts and measures here before, but they are critical in designing and monitoring a change. As part of your minimum value product, your gate will be based on the success of your measures. You can use this to hold it up to others as a positive impact of the change. This appeals to the logical side. Finally, success breeds success. People want to be like others. People want to be like successful people, so effective communication here can foster this feeling. So let's recap what we talked about today. We've looked at what makes the digital in digital transformation and what it doesn't mean. We've taken our digital transformation, seen how it's triggered, and built up into transformation initiatives into a roadmap. We've examined why digital transformations are problematic for oil and gas operators and looked at our three main causes. We've increased your odds by designing your business change into your digital transformation. Then we've looked at why change delivery is hard on the ground and the levers we can use on it. Finally, we've looked at scale-up and how we can sustain that. So what do you think? If you're working on a digital transformation, I want to hear about it. You've got my contact details on the screen here, so get in touch, please. I hope my insights here today help you going forward. Thank you. And it's over to you, Mark.
Mike, thank you very much for that. One of the points that you made there, that oil and gas largely lag behind other industries in terms of digital transformation. Why do you think that is? I mean, is it just because almost instinctively they dislike anything you can't thump with a hammer or slap grease on?
Well, I don't think that's quite right. I think the what I was talking about there, the exterior factors, because it's a commodity-based industry, it makes it much more difficult to be innovative. So if you're a mobile phone operator, yes, you can play with your customers. You can give them these, I think it was the Japanese guy, Kano, who said customer delights. That's things that the customers aren't expecting. If you're dealing with a commodity, you just can't do that. So digital transformations then have to focus on your ecosystem, so your supply chain, your partners on fields, and also your internal systems. I think within the oil and gas industry, there's just been that focus on let's do it internally, and then it just peters out without producing great successes, unfortunately.
And has the alignment between IT and the sort of wider business actually improved over the years?
I would say it has. I mean, I have worked in the oil industry for a long time, and the segregation between IT and business is slowly eroding. At one end of the scale, you've got where IT is the business, and the oil and gas industry has a long way to go there. But I think there is a much more growing up, joining up of working to work together on initiatives where the business recognise that IT have some skills in doing things like digital transformations and being able to assist them in that, and also coming to them for, can you help with ideas? I was working with an oil company quite recently. We had, because of a COVID issue, they came to us and said, we have to do some commissioning, and the guys that we're going to use are not allowed to travel. Can you help? And yes, within 4 weeks, we applied something like 6 separate pieces of technology very, very quickly to allow them to facilitate that. And that was because of a degree of trust between IT and the business. And that's the key thing, it's trust.
The only reason I know about this is I asked about this before I actually came on air. It's behind you.
Yes. Yes, this little rather expensive toy here. I don't know if you can see it very well. This is a RealWear helmet. I know I was talking about some pathway issues there. Let's go over that. Some of the blockers we had with this was actually normal configuration. It's underneath the rim. Mm-hmm. But you can't wear ear defenders in that configuration. So we worked with the partner, and these are 3D printed helmet clips that we came up with to allow it to sit above the rim, and you can wear ear defenders underneath the rim. So there was quite a lot of to and fro and those sort of things.
What does that thing do to actually improve the business?
It fosters a process called over-the-shoulder consultancy, basically. So you can have someone on a platform or a rig who's wearing one of those and is in contact with someone on the beach. And that person on the beach is the expert. And say, for example, we've got pump failure. A maintenance tech can go and look at the pump failure. They can call up the expert in Teams and say, look, got a problem here. I'm not sure what's going on. Can you have a look? And the expert can walk them through the issues there. The particular scenario we used it on was on remote commissioning, where we had techs and engineers on board who are not experts on it, but they were the hands of the experts who were on the beach. And it worked very, very well, I've got to admit.
I certainly things like, I can imagine you could do something very similar with drones, but I mean, could you pursue that down the line and possibly use robotics?
Yeah, funny you should speak about that. We've just commissioned 2 drone surveys last week, I think it was, for a gas terminal. Just looking at some features of the gas terminal. I can't really go into it. And also robotics, when we were looking at some use cases for a digital twin, one of the engineers came up to me and he said, we really need a robot. And I laughed because it was a bit beyond what we were talking about. And he said, no, if there's a gas leak in the platform, it goes dark. So it'd be really good if we could get an autonomous robot who was able to do gas sampling around the platform. And as I stood and looked at him with my jaw falling down, he went, actually, there's a couple of problems with that, because it'd have to be ATEX rated, wouldn't it? Let me go and think about it and come back to you. I'm like, oh, okay then. So, yes, there are scenarios where people can use that type of technology. And I think there has to be a marriage between technology experts, because I can't remember the name of it. It's one of those alphabet companies, but it's got the robotic dog. There's been a lot of people looking at that with a hell of a lot of interest. But there has to be a marriage between people who are looking at those type of technologies and the people in the business who know the problems. Yeah. And that example of the robots was a good one. We're not ready for them, and they're not ready for us. But we're close.
But classically, innovation works that way. It's somebody identifying a need and suggesting a possible technological solution, and then it's up to the engineers to actually close the gap.
Yes, I think there is a problem there in that the people who know the problem quite often don't know the domain areas where the solution is going to come from. So you need the domain area expertise in those solution areas, who unfortunately do not have the domain expertise in the source of the problems. So again, you've got that marriage of groups coming together. Difficult to do, but it's trust. That's what it's all about.
Good point coming here from Alan Bibb at Neptune Energy. Said many organisations have reorganised recently, asking fewer people to conduct more work or be more effective. This has left many with no bandwidth to change work practices and adopt digitalisation. Often in the short term, users are asked to take on more in order to unlock the eventual benefit of the transformation. Any tips, briefly, if you wouldn't mind, Mike, on how to recognise and address this paradox?
Okay, so that's part of the reasons why in digital transformations you need a C-level person up in the governance. If you don't, then you're going to get resistance because people are too busy. Even though the change may help them, they're too busy to actually do the change. Sometimes they need someone to give them the mandate, saying, no, you have to do this change. And you can do some of those change aspects to make it in a positive light. But you will find, and I was kind of hinting in that when I was talking about business unit managers don't want to do the change. It's not that they don't want to do the change, it's just they're too busy. Their people are maxed out. So if you're introducing a change, you need to be considerate of that. And that's where the C-level people come in to lean on the business unit managers. And then once we get to that, the sort of on-the-ground type thinking of the cognitive dissonance is about looking at what is causing the resistance. And it could be little things like with these things, you couldn't wear it with ear defenders. And there was things with and high noise conditions. So got some baffles on them, and the resistance went away. So there's tricks that takes experience to be able to spot these little blockers. Once you get over those little blockers, and they're typically small, they're the negative things, and then people start focusing on the positive things, and it becomes less of a change.
That's really interesting. Mike, thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Cheers, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Mike Gill there. Now, in this third section of sessions, the other two streams are Breakout H, and the award for best anagram goes to this one, and ECANS in the Grass with Jordan Schroeder, CISO at Barrier Networks. Breakout I is Move Your Data Anywhere in Minutes with Martin Humphrey, Enterprise Systems Engineer at Zerto. But here, and this is Breakout G, Kate Mackay, Managing Partner, Design Sprint Academy. With a timely warning release, systems react, but people rethink. Kate.
Thanks, Mark. Welcome. I don't think my slides are working. Can I? I'll just see if I can make that happen. Can everyone see my slides changing now? Yeah?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. So I want you to consider this image just for a moment and think about what it kind of means to you, and then guess what year it's from. So here's the thing. I've spoke about this quite often in the last couple of years. Nobody has any idea. And the question, is, people call out kind of guesses. They'll maybe say, yeah, any time from 1800 to perhaps yesterday. And you hear them kind of laughing out under their breath when they're doing it, because they know that the truth is it could have been from any time. It looks like the org chart in their organisation, and I bet it looks exactly like the org chart in yours as well. This one that you're seeing just happens to be more than 100 years old. It's a railroad organisational chart published in 1910 as the operating organisation of the Union Pacific and Southern systems. What's really shocking about our ability to carbon date this image is just how easy it would have been if it was an image of almost anything else. So if I had showed you a car, fashion, or even a telephone from that era, 1910, around that time, and asked you if it was modern or antique, you'd have had a pretty good idea, because almost everything has changed, but not management or the org chart, not really. Information flows up, decisions flow down, there's a place for everyone and everyone in their place. Somehow, amid a period of relentless innovation, including the internet, smartphones, self-driving cars, AI, and even rockets that land themselves, the way we come together as humans to solve problems and to invent our future has stayed remarkably consistent. Which means one of two things is true. Either we've perfected the way we organise and therefore stick with the way it's always been done, or we are stuck in that infinite loop of our own design, unable to break free and realise a better way of working. So let's hold that thought for a moment, or even park that. Because the thing is, it's complicated, right? We don't want to really think about it. Or is it, in actual fact, complex? Is there a difference? Complicated or complex? So you see here the humble engine. We would argue it's complicated. There's a clear relationship between cause and effect, but not everyone can see it. So me in my car could be driving out and I can hear something wrong. And I think, okay, I don't know what's wrong with my engine, but I know someone will in the garage. There could be multiple right answers to it, but I know that an expert can actually figure it out for me. There is a finite number of interactions and solutions to it, and it's pretty much something that we can predict and control. The garages set us up for 6-month services or year services because they know that our fan bell or our filters need changing. So consider this slide here. Are these images complicated or complex? Complex. We see here in these images a weather front, stormy seas, stormy skies, traffic built up because there's been a snow shower. This is complex. The relationship between cause and effect is clear only in hindsight, and it's difficult to define. We see that in weather forecasting, where we're trying to predict, and there's a sense that, yeah, we kind of know where that might land and how it's going to behave, but it's not something that we can control. There's no clear solutions or no right answer when it actually occurs. So how do we solve these complex problems today? As you can probably tell and are not surprised, given our approach to our organisational charts over the century, no less, we tend to use complicated solutions that are predictable, bear in mind, to solve a complex problem. So let's consider another operating system similar to that of our organisational charts. How to cross the road at an intersection. So 2 roads crossing present a deceptively simple challenge. How do we prevent cars from hitting one another while maintaining the maximum flow of traffic? You see here 2 options on this slide, traffic lights and the roundabout. Which is safer, do you think? The roundabout. 80% safer overall and 75% safer on collision. Which is the higher throughput? Again, the roundabout, 75% throughput. And finally, which is cheaper to maintain? You guessed it, the roundabout. So why a complicated answer to a complex problem? We tend to look at traffic lights as control and compliance. It's easy to roll out and tell people what to do. When we think about the roundabout, it's about trust and autonomy. We hand the power to an individual to make the decision that they can enter a roundabout and exit a roundabout safely without causing any harm to themselves, their vehicles, or others. And it makes you think, why? Why is it this way? The traffic light system, when we're thinking about control and compliance, is bureaucracy. When we think back to our org chart, when we think about those layers of management and information flows up, but decisions come down, this is the reason where we have that. But when we shift to trust and autonomy, this is where you then start to get that creative, critical thinking. You're putting the power to the people. So I give you another thing to consider. Imagine you are the owner of an office building, and you can read about this, the slow elevator problem, anywhere online. It's very, very good and very thought-provoking. And you are a tenant, you have tenants, complaining about the elevator. It's old and it's slow and they have to wait a lot. Several tenants are threatening to break their leases if you don't fix that problem. So consider this. It hasn't been presented to you neutrally. And like most problems we encounter in the real world, this is what happens. Someone has already framed it for you. The problem is that the elevator is slow. So in our eagerness to find the solution, many of us don't notice how the problem is framed. And there is a reason for this. Human nature, we don't like the problem space. We don't like the tension, the disease, the feeling of it's friction. We want a solution. We want to jump into that space where we can go, one less thing that I have to think about. And it's been born out of this culture of don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution. It feels great when you have a solution. It feels like it's finished business. I've done it. I can move on to something else. But what then happens, because someone else or some other situation has actually forced us to think and framed it for us, we start coming up with ideas to make the elevator faster. And another good scenario to talk about this very thing is Henry Ford had a great saying that was, if he had asked the people what they had wanted, they would have said a faster horse. But what he was able to do was reframe that problem. And in actual fact, what they didn't want was a faster horse. Their pain point was that they needed to get from A to B quicker. So when we look at this diagram here, when we're thinking about problem framing, okay, the elevator is too slow. And when we automatically think about the solution space, we're then saying, okay, let's make it faster. There's various options. We can upgrade the motor. We can improve the algorithm. Or hell, we can install a new elevator. But in actual fact, when we actually sit back and consider and spend much longer actually in the problem space, what is the actual fact the problem is the wait is annoying. It's not really that the elevator is slow. The pain point that people experience is that they've got things to do. So how about we reframe that problem and actually make them feel that the wait is shorter? So you could say, put up some mirrors, right? Everyone likes to look at themselves in the mirror in an elevator, check that they don't have their breakfast down their front or that their hair is sticking up. Install hand sanitizers, play music, whatever it is to divert that wait. So if I can use, this is a great case study, and forgive me for my poor pronunciation of Amarbachi waste energy plant in the outskirts of Copenhagen. So, and again, those that are listening might have a better idea of what the tech is here. But essentially, they created this new, I think it's a combined heat and power complex. And it's one of Europe's largest waste-to-energy plants in Northern Europe. And the challenge the City Hall had is age-old. How do you invest in industry in an industrial area that is also the home to your citizens, without those past compromises that we've seen, where the health and mental or health well-being of our citizens are compromised? So when we're thinking about the elevator problem, they could have just looked at it with that frame in mind of the problem. Okay, we need to begin solutioning on the obvious. How do we hide it? How do we cover it up? How do we make it cleaner? How do we stop people going past it? How do we manage air pollution, etc.? But instead, they used something, what we call how might we. They were able to reframe what the challenge was. And that was about how do we help families benefit from the integration of industrial areas in their city. And what they came up with was something just completely left field. So instead, they created the Copen Hill urban mountain on top of this power plant, this waste to energy. It's one big, great public park that you can ski on. It's the highest building in Copenhagen. And instead of being far away from it, you can take your family and enjoy it. It's environmental thinking at its best. It's a power plant that is so clean that you only have a little CO2 and steam coming out of the chimney, quite literally clean mountain air. There's loads of stuff online about it, and I think actually Ford are using it in one of their most recent adverts where a car comes down, and I recommend anyone go and check it out if you're looking for inspiration to reframe. So you might be asking yourselves, how does this all come together with what you're doing? You know, we're already doing agile, you know, we're transforming, we're bringing in all this new technology. Why do we even have to care about this? So if I can just bring us down to a kind of converge down on what it is that I'm trying to get over here today, is where this sits, this problem validation and solution validation happens way before we even think about technology. It happens where we can start that creative confidence that you can build with your teams, that you pick the better problem to solve and not jump straight into solutioning. Spend longer in that area of tension and really define where the problems are. And think about that gap, what Henry Ford found, that it wasn't a faster horse that people wanted, but they wanted to get from A to B faster. And where we see it in this diagram here is there's a huge part before where we're thinking about design thinking, and that there's a whole host of tools that you could be using with teams. It's co-collaboration, cross-organisation, and it's trust, it's autonomy, it's pushing innovation out to the fringes of your business. It's not just coming from the top down. And we hear agile with a capital A and lean and all these buzzwords thrown about, especially in the oil and gas sector at this moment. But what does that actually mean? And in actual fact, it's just the execution of the project. It's how you get it done. But there's that whole part beforehand that really could benefit the industry when we think about creative confidence, that critical thinking. How do we do things differently? And so finally, if we are to truly kind of transform the way that we innovate, problem solve, and enable our people, we've got to adopt the trust and autonomy of the roundabout, that creative, critical thinking. So where might you start? And it takes us way back to the beginning about the organisational chart. And when we start or reinvent how we actually solve our problems. So the org chart is a complex problem. It's full of nuances. It's people. They're not predictable. They don't fit into systems. And so perhaps it's where you have to start is actually not bringing in Agile, not bringing in technology, but actually start at the beginning. How do your people function? And address that complex problem with a complex answer. Thanks very much. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much for that. I'm slightly intrigued with this, I must confess, because how do you... Oh, is it possible for somebody in the inside of an organisation to think out, genuinely possible to think outside the box? How do you encourage that kind of behaviour? How do you recruit that kind of person in the first place? Because if they're that far off the track, they would be a complete pain in the bum to actually work with, surely, the rest of the time.
It's a great question, Mark, and I think that's why it's not been done with any great force or scale. I think we're seeing pockets of transformation in regards to our org structure, the design of how we work, but it is, intrinsically difficult. And I think where we've seen some of the tension already happen when organisations have tried to adopt that agile way of thinking and digitalise and bring technology in, the challenges lie with the actual org structure. When we look at some of the tech companies like Amazon or Google, etc., they're very flat organisations. Trust and autonomy have been built into it from the start. You see that they can spin off, do startups. There's that culture that's been there right from the start. And I think the difficulty is absolutely what you say, is where you've got these big companies that are, decades old. They've perhaps still got that organisational structure that was developed over and designed over a century ago, trying to do what these agile young companies are doing and not being able to execute it very well because of that command control format. So I think to answer your question, it's about embedding and growing. So you can't buy in innovation. You can't buy in, just change management. It's got to be grown. It's got to be nurtured. It's almost like that kind of test and learn environment. I think where the challenges have lain in the past is where they try to buy this all in, and it doesn't stick, and you have that resistance with your people. They will always revert back to what they felt comfortable with. And I think that is still a challenge that companies are experiencing today.
Logically, you would go outside. Logically, you grab somebody and say, right, come and look at this outside. You use your intelligence, etc. But again, I'm looking at that person from the inside thinking, no, you don't share my culture. And culture always trumps process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's where it's intrinsic that companies, this is a slow burn. This is not a sprint. It is something that has to start and that you have to nurture and that you have to invest in. And that's in upskilling, that's empowering the people who have all that knowledge about your business. Why would you dilute or shove that to side to bring a consultant in to do all that for you? It's about growing, it's about training, it's about almost like immersive training as well, experiential training, that you're actually living, breathing, doing it. You're testing, you're failing, you're reiterating and trying again. There's a reason why companies hate the term fail fast, adapt quickly, because especially in oil and gas, because it's a culture that has been told and educated risk is not good. We need to de-risk continually. So when all of a sudden you're saying, right, we need to behave like a startup or behave like, Amazon and Google, there's always going to be that discord. They can't do it. They can't make decisions like those companies because they're still entrenched in that framework. And that is, again, where the challenges lie.
Is it almost axiomatic that inevitably, every big company, however creative, however far-sighted, eventually will fossilize.
Yeah, and fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
I think this is the thing, and we're seeing it today, right? I opened with that slide, is that kind of, it's thought-provoking, where we tend to look at what's happening at the moment. I've heard it in circles, actually. It's almost like peacetime was pre-COVID. Being a leader and thinking about digital transformation, thinking about all of that. And peacetime, it was like, yeah, it's on my to-do list. It's somewhere down the line. And all of a sudden, it's now wartime leadership, and we're having to mobilise, and we're having to make decisions that, with emerging information or incomplete information, we're getting kind of kicked down the lane much quicker and accelerated because of COVID. Yet we're still trying to apply some of the work that we're doing, with old ways of working, and they no longer are relevant. And I think the org chart is a fantastic example of it hasn't changed, yet we still see that. And I would bet my bottom dollar, if we were to put the question out to the audience, I bet all of them were kind of sniggering, going, I feel it, we haven't changed that. And I think we have to go all the way back to that part first in order to really see the opportunities around what COVID has accelerated. For all the pain and the upheaval that we've experienced with the pandemic, for us that work in transformation and digital enablement and upskilling the workforce, this has probably been the best thing that's happened for us, that it's moved it from trying to educate companies to do this to actually get them doing it, not talking about it, its strategy and its C-level, but actually doing it and encouraging that kind of bottom-up as well as the top-down approach to it.
I came across a really good example of that the other day, and it's the story of Apollo 13. That a long way from home, things go terribly wrong. They're running out of oxygen and energy and everything else, and they're basically stuck in a freezing tin can. And they brought all the engineers together back in base, and Gene Kranz, who was the sort of the fellow in charge on base, gave them this rah-rah talk and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this and the other thing. And this 27-year-old farm boy from Iowa called John Aaron said, Gene, I'm sorry, we can't do that. He says, you don't have the power. And then John Aaron said it was the single greatest piece of management he's ever seen in his life. In a heartbeat, Krantz turned to him and said, fine, you budget the energy.
Yeah.
Put the entire project in the hands of a 27-year-old lad and said, you do it. Now, a man my age, that sounds terrifying, but it worked. It's having the courage to make that leap.
And again, it goes back to the traffic lights and the roundabout. We are, again, we have been, I think and again, I might get some of the facts around the org chart that was developed way back in 1910, but it was essentially designed where they wanted to up productivity. So they would just have their workers coming in, they would do the work and go off for a pittance. And the leadership team at the time was like, what if we told them what to do? And that we got their productivity up and we paid them an extra $5 bob or whatever it was at that time. And the people agreed to it because they wanted more money. And so they were squeezed into that command and control, that, the bureaucracy around that, because they got extra money for it. And we're still using that system today, yet our expectations and everything has been blown out the water over not even the last few decades, but certainly it's been accelerated over the last 12 months. It's no longer fit for purpose. So we need to bring that trust and autonomy into our businesses to make it work.
Kate, thank you very much for that. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. In fact, thoroughly enjoyed all the 3 presentations in this session. And thanks for your time. Much obliged.
Thank you.
We're going to be breaking now for 60 minutes for lunch. The final session of the day, session 3, will start at 1:30. Now is a really good time if you've got the opportunity to visit the exhibition hall, see the solutions on offer, and of course support our sponsors, without whom this entire event would be impossible. And don't forget to enter the prize draws too. But for just now, thanks very much for your attention and enjoy your lunch.